Man is a mystery. It needs to be unraveled. And if you spend your whole life unraveling it, don't say that you've wasted time. I am studying that mystery because I want to be a human being. Fyodor Dostoevsky. This video is about a book with a character that is probably more interesting than any other character I've ever come across. A character who is complex, confused, complicated, a criminal, yea, even a murderer. I am talking about the main character in the one, the only Crime and Punishment by my boy, Dostoevsky. Warning, if you are like me and like to experience stories for the first time without having any kind of preconceived notion or understanding of what the story is even about, stop the video here, go pick up the book, read it, and then come back because we have a lot to talk about. Now, about me, I don't read a lot of fiction. I've read books in the past with really good stories and I've enjoyed the story, but I just don't really find myself getting excited to pick the book up and keep reading it. There's just something about reading a story just for entertainment's sake I just don't feel terribly drawn to. When I sit down to read, I want something that's gonna tickle my brain. I want it to get in there and present new ideas, something I haven't thought of before. Years ago, I read Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. It was the first time I had read a fiction story where clearly the author had something to say more than just tell a story. His characters were human. They had unique insight. There was clearly some philosophy being interwoven into this story. However, Crime and Punishment, for some reason over the years, I had always heard it as kind of a hard to read book, that it was long, that it was dense and slow and boring. Last month, I took a trip to Spain. I knew I had some long flights ahead of me. I don't really like to watch a bunch of movies on those long flights. I prefer to read. So I figured, hey, I'm gonna be sitting there for a long time. Why don't I pick up Crime and Punishment and give it a go? If you decide to read this book, I would recommend reading it quickly. If you're one of those people who reads a little bit, puts it down for a few days, picks it back up, reads a little bit, puts it down, comes back, you might have a little bit of a hard time keeping up with a story for two reasons. One, while there aren't a ton of characters in here, they all have long Russian names. Not only that, they have like 3 versions of their names. Their full name, sometimes they're referred to by their last name, sometimes they're referred to by their middle name or just their first name, or also they have this completely different form of their name that's like a term of endearment. This copy had a list of the names at the beginning, which was very helpful. Just a little reference where it says their name and just a brief description on who they are. The second reason it would be hard to not read this fast is because there's 2 or 3 characters who pop in and then disappear for a while, and then they pop back in, and if you had spread this out over a long period of time, you might have a hard time remembering the details on who this person was and why they matter. That's my only caveat to reading this book. With that aside, I loved this book. This is now probably my favorite book. I'm so sad it took me all these years to read this, thinking that it was going to be boring or hard to digest. In fact, I would go as far as to classify this as a psychological thriller. Briefly, the storyline of the book is this. The main character, Raskolnikov, is a youngish student who decides he's going to commit murder, and then he commits murder. And the rest of the book is him dealing with the social and psychological impact of his decision. Before I started reading this book, I knew the basic premise of that, of like, oh, the main character commits murder and then he like deals with the consequences. I thought that meant the character had already committed the murder and then the story picks up. Oh no. The main character, Raskolnikov, commits murder in this book, probably in the first 80 pages. And the way that scene unravels is a good description of how Dostoevsky wrote this story. The murder is not only gruesome, but it felt uncomfortably real. The murder scene wasn't this like overly dramatized, disconnected situation, the way it unfolded felt like you were watching a true amateur commit murder for the first time. So I was surprised that was in there. Then the rest of the story is him interacting with friends and relatives and investigators and all the things that are going on in his head as he's facing the reality of what he's done. Pretty early on, I started to pick up tones of the author describing this character as likely a narcissist. And I thought, okay, is that the route he's gonna go? He's gonna make this character a narcissist. You know, he thinks he's above the law or he's more important or something, and that's why he commits this murder. Dostoevsky goes so much deeper than that, and it is fascinating. This main character, Raskolnikov, is so interesting. I do want to clarify something really quick. He's not interesting in the sense of you connect with him in any way. Like, oh yeah, you know, I could see me coming to that conclusion that maybe murder wouldn't be a bad idea. No, that doesn't happen. If anything, he's interesting as, wow, how could a human being come to that conclusion and be so convinced that they would go to those lengths of actually murdering someone? This is where I think Dostoevsky is a genius, and that he clearly understood human nature, the human experience. Just like in the quote that I said at the beginning, he really wanted to understand human beings, and his reasoning was so that he could experience this life as a human being to a higher extent. What I really loved in this book was the fact that the author, Dostoevsky, didn't take the easy route on describing any of the characters. None of them were put into this neat package of, oh, this is the way they are and it's very simple and that's easy to understand. No, he gave each character depth, these very complex human emotions, and in the main character also, he has these emotions that are confusing to you, the reader, confusing to him. And Dostoevsky doesn't just spell it out for you, which is so raw and human. We have emotions that are real and they're not wrong, but they can be so confusing. I want to talk about one specific section of the book to demonstrate what I mean by how interesting this book was. And it's when the main character, Raskolnikov, goes to talk to the primary investigator for the first time. The main character had decided to murder this old woman who was a pawnbroker. What she would do is people that were desperate for cash would come to her, sell a valuable item like a watch. She would give them cash, and then they could come back later and get their watch back if they pay her the money back plus interest. So she essentially took advantage of people who were desperate for cash. What she would do was when somebody would sell something like a watch to her, she would write the details of the person down, you know, their name, how much they paid for it, and then she would stick it to that item as a way of keeping track of everyone. Because of that, the investigators had a list of people who had used her services. Their thought was whoever murdered her was likely a person who had used her services before. So they had asked all these people to come in and talk to them. Our main character, Raskolnikov, then has to go in and talk to them. The primary investigator, Porfiry, is probably my favorite character of the book. He is very smart. He's very smooth. He clearly has spent a lot of time talking to criminals and getting in their heads. So when Raskolnikov comes into the room and he catches even the tiniest whiff that this investigator is playing games with him, he's not having it. In fact, we get in his head and he's immediately irritated. How dare this guy think he can play games with me? So you get this battle of these two intellectuals. The investigator is actually the first one to give us a glimpse into our main character's theory as to why he committed murder. The investigator kind of casually brings up, by the way, I read that article you wrote for the newspaper months ago. And Raskolnikov's kind of confused, like, what article? And he goes, yeah, no, the one that you got published, the one about your theory about ordinary and extraordinary people. Raskolnikov didn't realize his article got published. That's beside the point. But he's immediately nervous. He goes, how do you know I wrote that? I only signed it with an initial. And Porfiry, the investigator, says, oh, you know, I'm friends with the editor and I asked him and he told me it was you. And so they start this conversation back and forth about this article that he wrote, which essentially says the vast majority of people in society are ordinary. Every once in a while, somebody comes along, likely of higher intellect, who is extraordinary. Because this person is extraordinary, they are able to operate above or outside the boundaries of things like the law and morals and ethics. The only caveat is they are doing it because this will bless the lives of more people. So murdering a couple bad people or murdering even a couple innocent people, as long as it benefits many more people, the extraordinary person is totally justified in doing it. It's totally fine. The fact that the investigator knows about this theory and that he's talking about it in a sort of mocking way gets under our main character's skin. Raskolnikov right away is like, who does this guy think he is, trying to play games with me? And now he's poking this insecurity that I kind of know I have about this theory. So Raskolnikov walks out of the interaction and he immediately starts talking to himself in his own head, and he's upset with himself. You start to really see this inner battle going on inside of him. Now, if you think there's also a hint of him feeling guilty for having murdered someone, you would be wrong. In fact, this part, he says, I shall never, never forgive the old woman. That part caught me off guard. Like, whoa, I'm sorry. You'll never forgive the person you murdered? I think I missed the part where she asked for your forgiveness for anything. What I think Dostoevsky was saying was this woman represented this theory that Raskolnikov had. His theory was that he was one of these extraordinary people, and committing this murder was his first step into the realizing of him being extraordinary. And what he starts to find out is that, one, not only does it look like he may not get away with it, but two, you've got these regular people, like an investigator, who's telling him, gee, wouldn't it be funny if this murderer thought he was extraordinary and realized that he was actually just ordinary? How embarrassing would that be? So Raskolnikov is starting to go a bit crazy. He's losing his mind. He's getting really upset. And then he drifts off into a dream. I love the fact that the author used dreams in this book. I personally have had many experiences with dreams where I've had a dream that has helped me understand deeper emotions that I've been having about a situation or about a person. It's like my brain told me a story that helped me understand an emotion that I didn't even realize I was having. Super cool. Another reason why I think Dostoevsky was a genius and really understood the human experience. So in this dream that Raskolnikov has, he dreams that he wanders back into the apartment where he had murdered the old woman, and he finds her underneath his cloak. And he lifts up the cloak and she's kind of has her head bent down. And when he's finally able to make eye contact with her, what he realizes is she's laughing. She's trying to suppress her laugh so he doesn't hear that she's laughing. And he gets upset and he realizes he has the axe again, and he starts going at it with her. And she just starts laughing more. And then he can hear people outside the door in the hallway whispering and giggling, and he gets so upset and he tries to run out of the apartment, and it's full of people and they're just laughing at him. I love it. I love the imagery, the way it helps you understand his mindset without completely spelling it out for you. He had this theory, this wild theory that led him to murdering somebody, and now he's starting to realize, shoot, I may have been wrong. Again, not wrong about murdering. He doesn't feel bad about murdering this woman. He just feels bad that he may not be an extraordinary person. Which brings me to my kind of closing remarks on this. There's so many more things I could talk about this book. I could make 5 videos about it, and maybe I will. I don't know. Something I've noticed in society is when people behave poorly, when people do things that are really not good, we completely condemn not only the action but the person also. I believe Dostoevsky probably saw similar things back in his day. I think there's value in us trying to understand people. And it's important to know that trying to understand somebody is not the equivalent of condoning their bad behaviors. For example, somebody is racist or does things that are racist. Please understand, this is by no means me trying to find some kind of justification for racism. I will completely condemn it with everybody else. It is not okay. But if we need somebody to change behavior, like racist behavior, if we just completely condemn everything about them, we're gonna have an uphill battle trying to get them to change. Versus if we try to understand the complexity of this human being and interact with them as a human being, I believe we stand a better chance at helping to correct the poor behavior. That may be a whole nother can of worms, a totally separate video. That's just something that I've noticed for years, how quickly we are to put people in simplified boxes. They are Republican, they are far left, they are MAGA, they are racist. And then we just go, oh, everything about them is that thing, easy, done, bye-bye. Go further, go deeper. It does take more mental energy. I get it, but try. Also, very important to know is this isn't just about trying to understand other people. Equally as much, you should be trying to understand yourself. You will never completely understand another person. You're gonna be able to understand yourself a lot more because you spend significantly more time with yourself and you're the only person that's up in here. Sometimes I think us trying to understand ourselves is one of the hardest tasks for our brain to do. It feels like it takes an immense amount of brain energy to ask the question, who am I? Why am I doing this? What, huh? Just like Raskolnikov saying that he hates that woman. Huh? That's confusing. So go deeper, try to understand other people, try to understand yourself. And I believe reading a book like Crime and Punishment is a good exercise in doing that. So read it, get down in the comments. I want to hear from all the other people who also love this book. I don't know, I guess there's probably people out there who hated it. You're welcome to comment that too. And in the words of Dostoevsky, get out there, try and solve the mystery of being a human being.